and some compelling opening and closing arguments. And I think when you add it all together, I think the state did a hell of a job. I'm not Monday morning quarterbacking about any of the decisions the trial team made. I think they did an excellent job. They're a credit to our office. You know, anybody who does any kind of jury trial work knows that you just can't predict what a jury will do. Them's the breaks, and it's a bitter pill to swallow, particularly in a case like this. But like I said, we can strongly disagree with the jury's verdict, but we nonetheless respect the jury.
Do you have any messages for people in the community who have had direct confrontations with not only the Scorpion team, but other police officers? There are federal lawsuits that are currently underway, people who have accused the Memphis Police Department of brutality. Do you have any message to them?
I guess my message to the community would be twofold. A, even if you were out there outraged by this verdict, please respond in a lawful, peaceful manner. Second, as I said earlier, with respect to any charge of violation of the law, including by those who are sworn to uphold it, we'll enforce the law. And just as we did aggressively in this case, we'll do that in any other case in which the facts and the law suggest that anybody in the law enforcement community or anybody else has violated the law and used excessive force.
Does Mr. Hagerman or Headley or Johnson have any comment
about please.
Y'all tried the case?
Hagerman.
We tried real hard. We fought real hard in there. We knew this was always going to be difficult. As D.A. Mulroy said, we're trying the three least culpable in terms of, obviously, Mr. Martin was the primary actor, and he's entered a guilty plea. Mr. Mills, with the baton strikes, again, a primary actor, and he's entered a guilty plea. So we knew this trial would be hard. I think y'all saw us fight in there. We did the best we could, and the family, they've been great through this. Today's heartbreaking to them, but they've been with us fighting.
What is it like for you all to go through all of this and looking at the video and talking with the family and definitely expecting something else?
It's disappointing. It's heartbreaking. You try cases. It's a business of trying cases, though. Okay? There's always risk and there's reward, but we keep on going. We try to get justice. And I think we tried hard in there this week to get justice. I know the family was behind us, and, we didn't get the result we wanted or they wanted, but they've thought about Tyre, obviously, a lot this week, and they're thinking about Tyre now. And
Melanie? Tanisha? Anything?
Was there any bit of evidence that was presented over the last week and a half, or any argument made by the defense that felt particularly salient to you guys that you kind of were like, this kind of sucks to deal with and try and move around?
I don't think we can at this point sort of, like I said, Monday morning quarterback or think retroactively about this or that. This blow was particularly powerful, that one was particularly powerful. I think structurally, as Mr. Hagerman has already mentioned, the two defendants who were most culpable weren't present in the courtroom, right? That doesn't mean that the remaining three defendants weren't culpable. You heard our arguments in there about criminal responsibility, people being responsible for the acts of another, the duty to intervene, the duty to take affirmative steps at what was clearly, a person being beaten to death. That was a structural part of the trial that was a challenge for the trial team. Other than that, I think it's hard to identify any one thing, and it's hard to get inside the mind of the jury.
Will this verdict, is this going to affect Emmett Martin's plea deal at all, or any sentence he may receive in the district building?
That's up to the federal court. We really can't speculate on that.
What about on the state level?
Well, I think we're not really prepared to talk about that just yet, because what we're doing is we're waiting to see what happens over with the federal sentencing. And once we see what happens with the federal sentencing, we'll have a better idea of what we want to do with that case.
And my last question about the jury, because obviously the jury made the decision, but those who don't understand the process, I know you all want an unbiased jury, but why Chattanooga? Where did that come from as far as that jurisdiction?
Do you happen to know?
Yeah, there was a motion filed defense to change venue, and there was a study done of the amount of publicity in the various large cities in Tennessee, and it was found that Chattanooga had the lowest amount of pretrial publicity with regard to this case, and so that's why it was chosen.
All right,
All right. Thank you all very much.
Do you personally have anything to add or from?
Thank you, Maria. Okay.
Thank you all for being here with us this evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, yes, again, you just heard from District Attorney Steve Mulroy, you heard from Prosecutor Paul Hagerman, and just in terms of how they thought the progression of this case went. Again, you heard them saying that they were, of course, disappointed with the jury verdict and their process of this, and of course they were also saying that understandably the family was very upset and they left because they needed time to process all of this, but just hearing the comments, kind of hearing their initial reactions and reflections on this, saying that even though this is not what they wanted and not what they expected, they're going to continue to keep going and trying to continue to secure justice and kind of awaiting the federal outcome and federal sentencing, specifically after that trial happened last year. A couple of other interesting points that he had said there, specifically when the district attorney was talking, he was saying that this, of course, not the expected outcome, but he wanted everybody to know that the prosecution did a great job as to his opinion and just talk more so about all of the evidence that they lined up and that he thought it was sufficient and substantial enough, but of course did not sway the jury. Also talked about the selection of the jury coming from Chattanooga, saying they had the less media exposure, they had the fewest exposure just in terms of overall reaction and just initial hearing of this case. So that was why that jury was selected there. Of course, he also talked a little bit more about the initial reaction from the community coming specifically from the Chattanooga area and how that a little bit more shaped things up specifically with it being an all-white jury. In that area, of course, that has caused some controversy as people have been seeing these court proceedings as well. So that's really kind of some of the initial takeaways. I think one of the biggest ones is that he said that he spoke with Tyre Nichols' family. They had expressed support for the district attorney and the prosecution all week long, but specifically they had said that they needed just this time to, of course, process a decision that is so heavily impacting their family, a decision that they, of course, were not expecting in the progression of all of this, and that they are just going to take some time and reflect and recoup and kind of try to understand what their next steps are in this case as well.
Just talk to them after this when they were banking on those prosecutors to get them some type of guilty verdict and not having that today. Yeah, a lot is still to be decided about that because Desmond Mills testified. You'll remember that. He was one of the witnesses for the prosecution in this case. And he admitted on the stand that a lot of his actions and what he said was going to determine what his sentence would be on the state side because he signed an agreement with the prosecution that he would tell the truth and that he would give them information that is truthful or that could affect his sentence. So if they made that readily apparent in court that was a part of the deal. So that's still to be determined. His sentence and Emmett Martin's sentence as well, still to be determined out there. And the DA mentioned something that I mentioned in one of my reports, how much it seemed in this trial that they were pointing the finger at Emmett Martin.
Yeah,
and Emmett Martin is one of those who did the kicks and the punches to Tyre Nichols, and he pled guilty, but they labeled him as the vicious one in all of this. And a lot of people were looking at him, but he was not on trial today. In fact, he has pled guilty, so it would not be a trial for him. But everybody pointed to him, and you have to wonder if the jurors that weighed on them that these guys were not the ones who were really doing this stuff. It was Emmett Martin, and Emmett Martin wasn't on trial today.
But he admitted that he was waiting for the person that was his superior.
Hey, good evening. Yeah, before we were cut off, before the DA spoke with us a couple of minutes ago, I was interviewing Lydia Coombs here, our very great
witnessed
digital producer who
Tyre's
gave
condition
comprehensive coverage on our
deteriorate the
website,
longer they were out on the
actionnews5.com,
scene.
throughout
And
the
I think
trial. I
timing
wanted to
that
ask
they
you,
gave us was,
what
it was about
stood out to
19
you
minutes
about this
from the
case
time
that
he
you think
initially
may
got
have
to the
led
scene
to that not
and was
guilty
told to
verdict on
respond to
all
Nichols
counts
from
for
the
3
time that
officers
Nichols was
by the
actually
jury?
put into an ambulance
Jerry,
and taken
That was the question I had, because something didn't connect.
course,
It was something with these jurors, and my
that
question
verdict
was it the training?
that
Did the
their
training
faces
not
really
really
confident
connect? Because they were showing that these officers have been trained to do what they do, and they have been trained to go after people hard. As part of the Scorpion unit, what they were known to do. So did the training overshadow the fact that you have this video evidence that is so compelling? But when you go back to the jury room and you start looking at that, yeah, you see this video, you see the kicks, but you also have to counter that with what these officers were taught
And the DA believed
and
that
what they
they
were
were
told to do
wrong,
in certain
that they could have
circumstances,
applied
the level of
for
force
the
they're supposed to
psych
use,
house
and when they're
they
supposed to
played a
use
role in
that.
this case, but
And
you
whether
think
that
was enough?
outweighed
You
that
think
video,
obviously
and
it
we
was
all
for the
saw the
jury,
video, and I mean,
what more could the prosecutor
talked about it, you and Stephanie talked about it first when it first came out, when it came to our news station, and we analyzed it and we looked at it, and the shock of it, just seeing the kicks and your officers kicking and punching someone, and you would think that something like that might be so compelling, but you also have to think, and when these jurors went back, they have to look at the law. They have to look at the evidence that they have and have to compare it to the law. And I read over all of the jury instructions, and they told them that no matter what somebody said or anything like that, you have to go by the law. And so you have to wonder how all of that played in when they went into the jury room.
Seemingly that they were upset by them,
them as well as their
which
attorneys,
that
as
could have
well
been
as
the
their
case.
families.
There's
And as I
a lot of
mentioned
factors
before, we
that go into
heard
why
the
a
families
not
of these
guilty
defendants
verdict
as soon as they left the courtroom,
returned, and
they were saying
the
thank you,
decisions
Jesus,
have to be
and they were
unanimous.
embracing,
So
and they were
but
very
we may never know.
happy
Yeah,
that their
that's
family
right. Anything
members
more you
were
wanted to add
acquitted.
after
But
being in
again,
that courtroom
they're not
every day watching
completely
the
off
jury?
the hook. They still do
Uh,
have to
not-
face the
no, I don't- I
federal
think
charges
that's-
that they were all found
Well, y'all, Lydia
guilty
Cruz,
of.
if you're reading our website, actionnews5.com, she really
obstruction of
played a
justice, as
pivotal
well as
role
being
sending out those push
Email
alerts and writing detailed, comprehensive stories every day, keeping you all posted throughout this 9-day trial, the state trial and the federal trial. So thank you so much, Lydia. And Kim and Joe, back to you.
Federal trial as well as in this trial, but his attorneys were able to tell the jury multiple times that that kick was not to the head of Tyre Nichols, that in fact it was to his body. And the reason they gave was that Haley decided to kick in order to make Nichols give his arm to Smith and Bean so that he could properly be handcuffed. And of course that testimony resonated with the jury.
Sydney Graham still here?
Yeah, and during his closing arguments yesterday, Stephen Leffler, one of the attorneys for Demetrius Haley, actually was effective. He gave timestamps of how at the initial traffic stop when Haley was there, he had just been sprayed with pepper spray in his eyes, and he was still at the scene of that initial traffic stop when Martin, Bean, and Smith were trying to get Nichols into handcuffs. He went through timestamp by timestamp saying that it was at this time that Martin administered a kick, that he administered a punch, that he administered another kick. And this all happened before Haley even got to the scene. But then there was also video shown from the Sky Cop that shows that the second Haley did get to the scene, he made a comment that had an expletive in it, and when he hopped out the car, he did kick Nichols, according to his defense attorneys, in the arm to try to make sure that he could be put into handcuffs. But again, that seemed to resonate with the jury. Yeah, and you can see it in the courtroom actually. As soon as the verdict was read, I did have a direct line of sight to D.A. Mulray. And you could see that the emotion had flushed from his face after we got about halfway through the verdict being read. And of course, it took a while for that full verdict because we're talking 21 charges total, 7 charges per defendant, so that's 21 charges. It took a while for all of it to be read, and you could see Mulroy's face lose emotion explanation as it was being read completely by Judge Jones. Yeah, you heard it there, but you also did hear, we heard from Deputy District Attorney Paul Hagerman, who was the lead prosecutor on this case. He talked about where that jury came from and why Hamilton County in particular was chosen. Don't know how much of it you heard. The explanation that he gave was that it's one of the counties in Tennessee that received the least amount of publicity when it came to the Tyre Nichols case, and that ultimately is where they decided to choose the jury from, of course, after the judge gave them the go-ahead to get that outside jury to come here to Shelby County. Now, just for perspective, when that federal case happened, it took about 3 weeks. We had a verdict in a matter of 5.5 hours. It took less than 6 hours. They went to deliberate by 10, and by about 4:30, we knew that there was a verdict that had been reached. And in a situation like that, you don't really know what to expect when a verdict is reached that quickly. Now, in this case, of course, they began deliberating just after 12:30 yesterday. And the longer time goes on, the more you start to
Hey, Kim,
think
just
of
wanted
what
to give
the
a quick
possible
recap now
outcomes
of this
can be.
case.
So
This
again,
state trial
it's about
lasted
8 hours
9 days. I
between
know there were
yesterday and
17
today for
witnesses called by the defense.
It's fair to
The
say that
prosecutors
none of us
called
really
5
knew how
witnesses.
this
Now, we
was
haven't
going
had
to
an
be, that the
opportunity to
lesser
speak
charges
with
were in
defense
play.
lawyers. They
We
simply
also knew